For Lu Xun, ancient culture was China's greatest enemy. He thought the memory of ancient glory blinded people to the horrors of Chinese civilization. He wrote a story called Diary of a Madman about a lonely hero who noticed something very strange in a popular Chinese history book. On every page is written humanity, justice, morality, and virtue. But between the lines, the hero sees a secret message appear with the true meaning of China's history: people eating people.
What can be worse than to construct an allegory of a history of cannibalism? That Chinese people eat themselves, they eat each other. It is a culture of people eating people. So this is probably the most harrowing kind of allegory for Lu Xun. And that's the Diary of a Madman.
Lu Xun saw the madman as a metaphor for the revolutionary writer, someone who saw Chinese society in a way that most people could not. But Lu Xun was still pessimistic. At the end of his story, the visionary madman is cured. He becomes like everyone else, no longer able to see the horrors around him. As a college teacher in Beijing, Lu Xun was teaching a new generation a radical message. In a country consumed by its own insanity, the only clear vision belonged to the eyes of the madman. In 1925, China had no central government. It was a fragmented country, ruled by scores of warlords, more interested in the fingernails of their soldiers than the social conditions of the land they controlled. Most Chinese lived in the countryside, where social conditions were getting worse. Landlords and corrupt officials squeezed overworked peasants who still sowed crops by hand. To survive, many farmers sold their sons to labor brokers, sometimes before they reached their 4th birthday. To move the country forward, Lu Xun tried to root out the cruel habits that sprang from traditional Chinese culture. One of the worst was foot binding. Women's feet deformed for a sexual fetish of Chinese men. Lu Xun argued for women's rights and looked for inspiration in the scientific reason of the West.
To make China a new nation, you must introduce Western ideas, because the whole notion of a nation state was a Western model. There has to be a national culture, but a national culture has to be infused, so to speak, by what he considered to be good ideas from the West.
If the West was an inspiration, it was also a kind of nightmare. Protected by tens of thousands of soldiers, the Europeans, Japanese, and Americans all controlled territory called concessions in China's major cities. In these foreign concessions, businessmen enriched themselves by exploiting cheap Chinese labor. Many women earned as little as 30 cents for a 12-hour day. In silk factories, 12-year-old boys and girls used their bare hands to pull cocoons out of vats of boiling water. In 1925, Shanghai cotton mill workers rioted after a Japanese foreman killed a Chinese worker. British police fired into the crowd, killing 11 people and wounding 50 more. In Beijing, a group of Chinese students marched against growing Japanese imperialism. Chinese police fired into the crowd, killing 47 students. Among them was Liu Hezhen, a pupil of Lu Xun.
Liu Hezhen is a Chinese girl who has died for China. If China is not to perish, then the future holds a surprise for the murderers. Lies written in ink can never disguise facts written in blood. Blood debts must be repaid in kind. The longer the delay, the greater the interest.
Lu Xun's rage spilled out in his writing, but it would take two men of action to turn China's rising anger in a revolutionary direction: Chiang Kai-shek and Mao Zedong. Their struggle for control over China would consume the country for the next 20 years.